Bindu Wavell here is one of the community heroes. He contributed a lot to the SDK, which came out on version 5, together with Ole, which is taking pictures there. Hey, Ole. And so he's been around in the order of the bee also since the beginning, and he came now all the way from the US. So I hope that you will enjoy his presentation. He's doing another hands-ons later on, and listen to what he has to say. He's one of the heroes in the community. So I will let you with him. Thank you. There you go.
Okay, I'm going to get started. I think I can do this in about 18 minutes, and since we're a couple minutes late getting started, I'm going to just dive in. My name is Bindu Wavell. I'm the chief architect at Zia Consulting, and we're a platinum partner of Alfresco's in the United States. What I want to talk to you about today is some work that we started at the last global virtual hackathon, which is basically some tooling to automate a lot of the mundane things that we do with the SDK, setting up projects and then building on top of those projects. So we basically started with a couple high-level goals. So first of all, we want to increase productivity for people developing Alfresco extensions. And so how do we do that? Basically, we handle a lot of the boilerplate and complexity. Right? So for example, if you want to create a web script, you might have to create 6 or 7 different files with specific naming conventions, folder locations. You know, when you want to do that, you have to go do, like, look on the wiki or the docs page. You have to cut and paste a whole bunch of stuff. You got to make sure you make everything in sync, unless you're doing this all day, every day, and you remember that, which I don't. And I think most of the people we have working on Alfresco probably don't too. So you know, that's one example, and there's a lot more where there's a lot of boilerplate that we want to reduce. And we also, like, I don't know if anybody's used the SDK. I hope a lot of people here have. Cool. Okay. So when you're using the SDK to start a project, you have this big, super long command line to, like, go find the right archetype, and so that we get rid of that. We help you focus on your solutions, on your business logic, and not so much on how do I create an action or a behavior, but what does the action do? What does the behavior do? And then the kind of second area of goals is we want to keep it familiar. So we actually built a version of the 1.0 SDK that we called Quick Start internally, and we were not able to share that with the community. In my opinion, it was way better than the 1.0 SDK, and I think it informed a lot of what happened with the 2.0 SDK. So this time around, we're basically saying, you know, I had people in my company who had this awesome SDK, and nobody else in the community had it, which meant actually it was really hard to support, even internally in our company, because there were only like 4 or 5 people who were experts, rather than hopefully, you know, 100 people or 200 people. So this time around, from the very beginning, we got approval for it to be an open source project that's on GitHub, and it's using the SDK, right? So we're just adding to the SDK. In fact, you know, when you build a project with this, it's actually just driving Maven to build a project and adding some stuff to it. We have these kind of text-based guides. So just in your terminal, you type a command, and it's going to prompt you for the stuff you need to provide. It'll explain it, it'll give you links to documentation, and then boom, it'll do the stuff for you. So most of this presentation is going to be me talking through a video. So let's get this video going. Hopefully can people see that? Can people see that video? Yeah, in the back? Okay, cool. So basically, in order to use this, you do need Node.js. Our thinking on that was that it's cool. Our thinking on that was that you need Node.js anyway if you're doing testing for for iCal stuff. So it's not that big of a stretch to just say people doing Alfresco development need to have this. So basically, I installed Node.js, I installed Yeoman, and now I'm installing the generator Alfresco. And all the instructions for this are going to be in a slide deck on the website, so you don't need to like take pictures or anything. And so basically, we're going to start out, we're going to create a project. So I don't know if, hopefully you kind of know how difficult it is to do the Maven archetype command. This is all you have to do with our project, Yo Alfresco. That's it, right? You don't have to remember anything else, just Yo Alfresco, right? And if you want to do oh, check out the logo. That took like 6 hours, okay? So you can choose the version of the SDK. And we have the recommendation there. Use 2.1.1 if you're using Alfresco 5, or 2.2.0 if you're using 5.1. And now you may not be able to see this very well, unfortunately, because of the light. But it's basically prompting you, what is your group ID, your artifact ID, the stuff you normally have to paste into the SDK. Do you want community or enterprise? If you select enterprise, it's automatically going to put the enterprise profile into your run scripts and stuff like that, so you don't have to remember. Now it's basically called out to Maven to build the project. And then it's going to add some extra stuff to it. Boom, project's created. Okay. Now in this case, the default is to remove the top level repo amp and share amp, the source amp. So we have a project that doesn't actually have any way to put customizations into it, right? So right now what we're going to do is we're going to create a source amp, and that's basically going and getting the repo amp and the share amp, but it's allowing you to have control over the name, the artifact ID, the group ID. I'm going to just pause this for a second. From the side, I cannot see that at all. Can you see this? Yeah? Okay. Okay. So again, it's just prompting you, and you can see the documentation is in line. And now it's gone off and it's created stuff. It's actually automatically editing the POM files for you, so you're not having to do any of that, right? You can just, again, focus on your business solutions. Okay, so that's the repo amp and the share amp. We're just Yo Alfresco : amp. Boom, done, right? So now we want to create a model, right? So it's going to basically say, what's the name for your model? What's the author name? What's the namespace, URI? Boom, it's going to create the model for you. It's going to create the bean definition to register the model. And it's going to plug it into the project, so the context file is registered. And I did grow the mustache just so I could look like the Yeoman on the screen. So again, we're just asking for the base stuff. There's a lot more we could do with the model generator, with like creating a constants file and automatically generating stuff for share. We're not doing that yet. Hopefully that's something we can add pretty soon. So basically this is going to open up and just show you the contents of the files that have been created. So this is the bean definition, and then this is the actual model. And in here you can see there's a bunch of comments, including links to the documentation, and then even examples. And we have all the top level elements. We filled in all of the stuff, right? And then we have commented out like a full type definition with every possible element that you could want in the right order, because that matters, right? So you can just cut and paste from that and just quickly build out a model, right? And of course, there's references to the documentation, so you can quickly go for, you don't have to go Google and find the right page. This is sort of, in our opinion, the canonical documentation for this piece of the system, and it's just referenced right in line. It's referenced when you're actually building the thing, so that if you have questions about why am I being asked about the author or something like that, and then in the generated artifacts. And then there's crazy stuff in the model that we didn't know about, and you're like, oh, look, if you read the XSD files, there's extra stuff that isn't documented anywhere, and it's kind of cool. So that's in here as well. Okay, so we made a model. So let's go ahead and create an action, I think. Yes. Okay, so this basically is just a piece of business logic that runs on a node. All you have to know is Yo Alfresco action. Of course, all you really have to know is Yo ---- help, because it'll tell you all the other stuff. And then it's going to guide you through and say, okay, what's this action for? It's for getting sentiment analysis. So we want to go off to some third-party system and obtain sentiment analysis on tickets for a support system, which is what this example is building out. You got to give it a name, a package, a description. and then it'll go off and scaffold out the action class, the bean for registering it, and also the NLS file, and it will register the NLS file. So we can quickly see those files. This is the class. And also notice in the comment here, this is Java code for running an action. Just like if you want to run this action, and you probably can't see here, this is the ID for this action, the one that you just scaffolded, right? So you can take this Java code, you can paste it somewhere else, and it'll actually call this action. And then there's a JavaScript example as well right in the code. Again, we're just trying to kind of move people along. So you do a little bit of scaffolding, and then you can sit there and focus on your real work. NLS, kind of boring. OK, so now we can do a behavior. And I'm going to actually start talking ahead, because this is going to basically be the same thing as the action. And I want to explain a little bit about what we're going to do after this. It's a little inconvenient, but I wanted you to see the whole process in real time. So I showed you early on creating some source amps. So source amps are amps that are kind of exploded with source directories where you can go in and build customizations. But we have two other types of amps we can integrate into your projects. So we have an amps and an amps underscore source directory in the root of the project, and you can dump amp files in there. You know, the repo amps in the amps folder and the share amps in the amps share folder, just like if you've installed Alfresco. And then if you yo Alfresco amp and you select the local option, it will actually allow you to register those, and it'll put them into the Maven files for you automatically. It will actually pull out the group ID, artifact ID, and version out of the amp files and give those to you as defaults, right? So it's, again, super, super simple, and it will actually list amp files that exist in the amps or the amps share folder that haven't been registered yet. So once you register them, they don't show up in the list. And if you don't have any amps that have, if all the amps have already been registered, if you try and run that, it'll say, hey, there's no amps to register. It's all done. So actually what I did here was I copied the JavaScript console, repo amp, and share amp, and then I'm just registering those. Totally straightforward. Just answer a couple questions. All you need to know is yo Alfresco amp, right? Maybe where to put them. And then the other option is remote amps. And remote amps exist in some Maven repository somewhere. Uploader Plus, one of our favorite Alfresco extensions, is available on Maven Central. Right? So we're actually able to reference it just by specifying the group ID, artifact ID, and version, and then the Maven build process will actually bring that down and integrate it into the project. Of course, we're putting it into the POMs for you in the right places, setting up overlays, all of that stuff. So one thing that you'll notice is in that first example, I used some command line arguments, -A and -W. In the second example, I'm actually going to provide all of the answers using command line options. You can see that it basically just automatically did that. So you could actually kind of make a playbook with a bunch of these kind of full things and just cut and paste. So for web script, I'm going to do listing web script to basically list tickets. So it's just a get web script. And you'll see there's like 20 questions. You want Java, you want JavaScript, you want both. And this will eventually scaffold out, as I said earlier, the JavaScript controller, the desk.xml file, the config file, the properties files, the internationalized properties files. And all of the naming is in sync, and there's documentation links inside, so you'll see where to go to get more information. And you can see I've got snippets of the online documentation right in line, like why am I asking you for a description or a kind or a short name, right? What does that mean? And then there's a URL for each of these items. So in this case, we're just building one web script. So it's just a get web script. I'm going to run through, once this is done, I'll actually run through a second example where I'm going to do get, put, post, and delete. So I'm going to do the CRUD operations for ticket, right? So this is tickets. I'm going to do a CRUD operation for ticket, and it will actually, I think it scaffolds out like 30 files or something like that, all like, all with the right names and paths and everything. So I don't know that I have much more to say about that, other than hopefully, maybe I can speed this up. Yeah, maybe I'll just skip ahead a little bit. So that scaffolded that out. And then we'll go through. OK, so here we're actually doing get, post, put, and delete, and we're doing HTML and JSON. You can actually do all of the supported formats, right? You can just select from them, and it'll generate all of the free marker templates for you. Again, they're not domain specific. So again, I'm going to skip a little bit. And this is asking you everything about your transactions and read, write, all of that stuff. In this case, we're pretty close. And a couple more things, and then boom, 30 files generated, right? So now you can start Alfresco, and all of this stuff just works. And you can do hot deployment, RAD. It's all plugged into the Tomcat context files for you. It just works. Maybe that should be our slogan. It just works. OK, so there's still a lot to do, right? We still need better test coverage. We do have like 96, 97% test coverage now. So if you just count by lines of code, we're doing really well. But if you look at sort of feature coverage, there's a lot more to do, and we want it to be awesome. I can say that we've done a lot of refactoring. Like, this has been a very iterative process, and the tests have helped a lot. So that's a kind of driving us to get even better test coverage. We've got a bunch of documentation. We've got a code of conduct. We've got pull request guidelines, issue guidelines. All of that's in the GitHub project. But we do need more docs. We need to do extensions to the existing generators, like I was talking about with the model. Let's plug it into Share. Right? And then lots more generators for workflows, jobs, all of the extension points that Martin has been putting out on the docs site. So in conclusion, if you use our project, you'll get started quicker, and you'll write significantly less boilerplate. Right? You're not going to be in there hacking on POM files and Tomcat context files. You can just focus on the business logic. And hopefully, you guys will be inspired to try this out, and it'll be fun and interesting, and you'll want to contribute back, and you'll help us make some more generators, right? So we can get full coverage for all of the supported extension points. That is the end. 16 minutes and 25 seconds. So, any questions? Yes.
So the generators. First of all, that is really great work that you guys are doing. So you have the generators, and then do you still use their tool for doing the rest of the deployment, or then you are switching to the other regular tools for doing the hot deployment on Tomcat, or you can still?
No, it's actually, so for example, when you make share source modules, and I just made one, but you could have, we often have 6 to 10 source amps in each of our projects. We have lots of them with little pieces of business logic broken down. So all of that stuff is integrated into the Tomcat context files. So the hot deployment RAD stuff is all working. Of course, it doesn't work in the 2.2.0 SDK, or at least the parts that rely on spring loaded don't work in the 2.2 SDK. But otherwise, that's all working just the way that it normally works with the SDK. So you use run.sh, and then if you want to do the hot deployment, you use Maven compile. But that all works the same. But it's not just that it works the same. It works the same, but you can have lots and lots of, you can add lots and lots of modules, and it does all of the work for integrating it for you so that that continues to work. Will?
Obviously, you're using supported extension points, correct? So in theory, if you want to upgrade to the next target version, say 5.2, when that comes out, is it easy to do that? Can you see
So the question was about sort of upgrading versions of the SDK and of Alfresco. We don't have a great story about that right now, and basically the reason we don't have a great story about that is because the SDK doesn't have a great story for that. I'm not throwing anybody under the bus. You know, I feel as responsible for that as anybody else in the room. but I think we need to focus on that, and then it should be, we can definitely do that. We haven't focused on it yet. Yeah, thank you. Anyone else? It is currently AMP artifacts only, although if you look at the root folder structure, you'll see there's a models folder with the platform and share. So it's just a matter of, the infrastructure has all been built for supporting share artifacts. There are no official there's nothing from Alfresco that says this is how you should structure a repo artifact, right? So I haven't plugged that in, but I have there's basically a JSON data structure that sits in the background that's keeping track of all of the modules, whether it's repo or AMP, and it knows if it's repo or AMP, jar or AMP. Right now everything is AMPs, but that's flipping a switch and adding a little bit of code, and it's just, I don't want to get too far ahead of what the SDK team is doing, because then we'll have to, we'll be in different places. Yep. Anything else? It's Apache 2. Yeah, it's on GitHub. It's under my account. It's not even under Zia, so it's Bindu Wavell. I thought I had a slide with that. Bindu Wavell /generator-alfresco on GitHub. Anything else? So we're going to do a hands-on session right after this. And basically, I'm going to try and get anybody who comes in to be able to have this either set up on their own machines or on a cloud IDE in 40 minutes. So depending on how many people show up, we may just focus on the cloud IDE. But it should be, other than the time it takes to download the Maven artifacts, it should be really straightforward to get this all up and running very, very quickly. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.